In the middle of my son's wedding, the bride-to-be declared in front of 300 guests, "Sign over those 15 condos to me immediately, or don't expect this wedding to happen." Standing there in that grand ballroom in front of all our family and friends, I felt utterly humiliated, my hands trembling. But I quickly regained my composure, took a deep breath, stepped up to the altar, and grabbed the microphone to make my own announcement. Just 5 words came out of my mouth, and instantly everyone around me was in shock. My future daughter-in-law's face turned as white as a sheet of paper, and she bolted toward the exit, desperately trying to escape. "Hello everyone, thank you for being here. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below." This is a fictional story created for entertainment, exploring themes of fraud and manipulation. The lessons woven throughout are meaningful and worth reflecting on. So what were those 5 words that made everyone gasp? Let's continue. The orchids were perfect. White phalaenopsis flown in from Thailand, their petals so pristine they looked almost artificial in the late afternoon sunlight. They cascaded from crystal vases lining the aisle, draped the altar, crowned every table in the Ritz-Carlton's oceanfront ballroom. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Atlantic stretched endless and blue waves folding gently against the Fort Lauderdale shoreline. A string quartet played Pachelbel's canon in D. Catherine's favorite. She would have loved this. I stood at the back of the room, watching 300 guests settle into their ivory chairs, their murmurs blending with the music. Colleagues from Donovan Properties, Matthew's friends from college, neighbors, clients, distant relatives who materialized whenever there was champagne and a 4-course meal. They were here to witness my son marry the woman he loved. Except I knew something they didn't. I adjusted my Thai silk charcoal gray, the one Catherine bought me for our 25th anniversary. My fingers remembered the weight of her hand guiding the knot into place. "There," she'd said, smoothing the fabric against my chest. "Now you look like a man who owns half of Fort Lauderdale." That was 8 years ago. Pancreatic cancer took her 4 months later, so fast I barely had time to say goodbye. Matthew was 27 then, still finding his footing at the company, still calling me for advice on deals and relationships and what tie to wear to board meetings. Now he was 35, senior vice president, confident in ways I'd never been at his age. And he was about to marry a woman whose real name wasn't Isabella Green. The orchestra shifted into Wagner's bridal chorus. The guests rose. I turned toward the back entrance where the bridesmaids began their procession, 5 women in dusty rose gowns, smiling like this was the happiest day they'd ever witnessed. Maybe it was. Maybe they didn't know what I knew. Then she appeared. Isabella Green stepped into the doorway, backlit by the golden Florida sun. And even I, who'd spent $60,000 and 3 months investigating her, had to admit she was stunning. The dress was custom Vera Wang ivory silk that caught the light like water, a cathedral train that whispered against the marble floor. Her dark hair was pinned in soft waves, a diamond tiara glinting at her crown. She looked like every man's dream, like the woman you'd give anything to keep. Matthew stood at the altar, hands clasped, tears already forming in his eyes. He looked at her the way I'd looked at Catherine on our wedding day, like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. My chest tightened. The processional was slow, deliberate. Isabella moved down the aisle with the poise of someone who'd done this before, which according to Frank Morrison's investigation, she had. 3 times. Different names, different men, different states. Always the same ending, empty bank accounts and broken hearts. But Matthew didn't know that yet. She reached the altar. Reverend Palmer, a kind man in his 70s who'd baptized Matthew as an infant, smiled warmly. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here today." Wait. Isabella's voice cut through the music. The quartet faltered notes, dying mid-phrase. 300 heads turned. She released Matthew's hands and stepped forward, her train pooling around her feet like spilled silk. "I'm sorry." she said, her voice loud enough to carry to the back row. "I need to say something before we continue." Matthew blinked. "Isabella, what?" She turned to face the crowd, and I saw it then, the shift, the way her expression changed from blushing bride to something harder, sharper. She found me in the back, locked eyes, and smiled. Not a warm smile, a calculated one. "Alexander," she said, addressing me directly, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "I need you to do something for me. For us." She gestured toward Matthew, looping him into whatever script she'd prepared. The room went silent. Even the ocean seemed to hold its breath. I didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. "Before Matthew and I exchange vows," Isabella continued, her tone sweet but unyielding, "I need you to sign over the 15 condominiums." She paused, letting the words settle. "The properties on Las Olas Victoria Park Harbor Beach. All 15. I need them transferred into my name. Today. Now. Before the ceremony continues." A ripple of shock moved through the guests. Someone gasped. I heard Kevin Riley, Matthew's best man, whisper, "What the hell?" Matthew's face drained of color. Isabella, this wasn't." She turned to him, placing a hand on his chest, her voice softening just enough to sound reasonable. "Baby, we talked about this. Building our future together. I need to know your father trusts me. That he trusts us." She looked back at me and the sweetness evaporated. "If you can't do that, Alexander, if you can't show your son that you believe in his choice, then maybe we shouldn't be having this wedding at all." The room erupted in whispers. 300 people who'd come for cake and champagne were now watching a real-time hostage negotiation. Matthew looked like he'd been punched. His mouth opened-closed, no words coming out. Isabella raised her chin. 15 condos. $35 million. That's what it takes to prove you respect your son's decisions. That you're not one of those controlling fathers who can't let go. She tilted her head, almost daring me. "So what's it going to be, Alexander? Do you trust me, or don't you?" I could feel every eye in the room on me. The weight of expectation, judgment, confusion. Matthew's gaze burned, the hottest pleading, humiliated, desperate for me to fix this, without destroying him in the process. I thought about Catherine, about the last thing she said to me before she slipped into the morphine haze that final week. "Protect our boy, no matter what it costs you." I'd made a promise, and I intended to keep it. I walked toward the altar. Slowly. My dress shoes clicked against the marble, the only sound in the entire ballroom. Guests leaned forward in their seats. Matthew's jaw clenched. Isabella's smile widened. She thought she'd won. I climbed the 3 steps to the platform. Stood between my son and the woman who was trying to destroy him. Looked out at 300 faces I'd known for years, decades, lifetimes. Then I reached for the microphone in Reverend Palmer's hand. "I have something to say to all of you." The microphone hummed in my hand, a low electric buzz that filled the silence. 300 people stared at me, suspended in that strange liminal space between confusion and anticipation. I could hear the ocean through the open balcony doors, waves rolling in, indifferent to the wreckage about to unfold. Behind me, Matthew's breathing was sharp and shallow. Isabella stood frozen, her perfect smile locked in place, but I saw her fingers twitch toward the folds of her dress, already calculating her exit. Not today. I clicked the remote in my left hand. The projection screen behind the altar, installed that morning under the guise of displaying our family slideshow, flickered to life. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "The wedding?" I said, my voice steady, amplified across the ballroom, "is canceled." The murmur exploded into chaos. Guests half rose from their seats. Someone dropped a champagne flute. The crystal shattered against marble. Matthew lunged toward me. "Dad, what the hell are you?" I raised my hand, still holding the microphone, and he stopped. His face was white eyes, wild with humiliation and fury. I hated doing this to him. God, I hated it. But I loved him more than I hated this moment. The woman standing beside you, I continued, turning to face the crowd again, is not who she claims to be. Isabella, no, Maria let out a breathless laugh. Alexander, this is insane. Matthew, your father is... I clicked the remote again. The screen filled with an image of Florida driver's license. The photo showed the same dark-haired woman in the Vera Wang gown, but the name beneath read, Maria Elena Santos. Date of birth, April 19th, 1992. Address, Miami-Dade County, not Boston, not the upscale Beacon Hill townhouse she'd described over Sunday dinners. A subsidized apartment complex off Biscayne Boulevard. The ballroom went silent. "And her name," I said, "is not Isabella Green. It's Maria Santos." I clicked again. A second document appeared, a social security card laminated, the numbers clear. I'd had Frank Morrison verify it through his contacts at the bureau. Issued to Maria Elena Santos, not Isabella Marie Green. The social security number she gave you, Matthew, when you added her to your health insurance, it's fake. The card she used when you opened your joint bank account, forged. Matthew turned to her, and I saw the exact moment doubt cracked through his certainty. Isabella, what is he talking about? She reached for his hand. He pulled away. Another click. The screen split, side-by-side photographs. On the left, Isabella at their engagement party 6 months ago, radiant in a champagne cocktail dress, Matthew's arm around her waist. On the right, a booking photo. Maria Santos' hair pulled back, no makeup, holding a placard with a Miami-Dade case number. Same woman, same sharp cheekbones, same dark eyes. No question. A woman in the third row gasped. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." I advanced the slide. A document from Boston University appeared, official letterhead registrar's seal. The text was simple. No records exist for an Isabella Marie Green enrollment years 2010 to 2014. She told you she graduated summa cum laude from BU with a degree in art history, I said, looking at Matthew. His jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Boston University has no record of her existence. Another slide, a lease agreement for an apartment on Newbury Street in Boston. The address Isabella claimed as her childhood home, where she said her late parents had raised her. The document showed the property occupied by a retired schoolteacher named Dorothy Walsh. No connection to anyone named Green. No connection to Maria Santos. Her past. I said each word, deliberate, is a fabrication. Maria's composure finally shattered. She spun toward the back of the room, her train tangling around her ankles. This is ridiculous. He's lying. He's been trying to sabotage us from the beginning. She made it 3 steps before she saw them. 2 security guards stood at the main entrance, arms crossed, faces impassive. Another pair flanked the side exits. I'd hired them a week ago, professionals from a firm that specialized in high-profile events. They weren't here to hurt anyone, just to make sure no one left before the truth came out. Maria froze. Her eyes darted from door to door, trapped animal looking for a gap in the fence. "Oh, Matthew," she said, her voice cracking, turning back to him with tears suddenly streaming down her face. "Baby, please, listen to me. Your father is lying. He's always hated me. He hired people to fabricate this. Is your name Maria Santos?" Matthew's voice was flat, empty. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. It's complicated. Is your name Maria Santos? A beat. 2. Yes, she whispered. But I can explain. Did you lie about Boston, about your degree, about your parents? Tears poured down her face, but I saw what Matthew couldn't yet. Her eyes were already scanning the room, looking for allies, calculating her next move. The tears were real. The remorse wasn't. I had reasons, she said. I was protecting myself. My past, there are people. Matthew stepped back like she'd slapped him. The guests were on their feet now, phones out filming. This would be on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook before the hour was out. I'd known that when I planned this. Public exposure was part of the strategy, make sure she couldn't disappear, couldn't reinvent herself in another city with another name. Let the whole world see. Kevin Riley Matthews' best man moved to his side, put a hand on his shoulder. Matthew didn't seem to notice. Why? He asked her, and for the first time his voice broke. Why lie about your name? Maria's mouth opened, but no words came. I clicked the remote one final time. The screen went black, then, in white text against the void. Criminal record, Maria Elena Santos, Orange County, Florida. 2017, Miami-Dade County, Florida. 2019, outstanding warrant. 2021, the ballroom erupted. Shouts, gasps, the scrape of chairs as people pushed back. Maria's face went from pale to gray. Matthew looked like someone had reached into his chest and torn out his lungs. I raised the microphone one more time. And this, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos, is only the first piece of evidence. Maria's voice cracked across the ballroom. Matthew, please, you have to believe me. He's making this up. I clicked the remote. The screen shifted. An arrest record appeared, Orange County Sheriff's Office, complete with badge seal and Maria's booking photo. Maria Elena Santos arrested August 12, 2017. Charge fraud, first-degree felony victim, loss $180,000. 2017, I said. She convinced a retired veteran she was an investment consultant. $180,000 for a fund that didn't exist. Convicted. 18 months probation. Matthew turned to her. Maria's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Another click. Miami-Dade County. Same woman, different placard. Maria Elena Santos arrested June 3, 2019. Charge identity theft. Victim loss $95,000. 2019. She stole a woman's identity, social security number, credit card, savings. $95,000. Another conviction. A man in the second row stood and walked out. One more click. A bench warrant filled the screen. Active warrant, March 15, 2021. Maria Elena Santos bond, $500,000. She's been running for 2 years, I said. Active warrant. She changed her name to Isabella Green to avoid arrest. She targeted my son to disappear and needed money to do it. Maria's face went gray. Matthew caught her arm, then seemed to realize what he was doing and let go. I clicked again. The screen split. On the left, photographs of Maria with a man I didn't recognize. Kissing at South Beach. His hand on her waist outside a restaurant. Champagne glasses raised on a hotel balcony. The timestamp, December 28, 2022. 3 weeks ago. His name is Dustin Hart, 36 years old. I paused. He's her boyfriend. A collective gasp. Someone said, Jesus Christ. Matthew stared at the screen. No, that's not. Another click. Text messages filled the screen. Maria to Dustin. November 10th. Once I get the condos, we sell fast. 35 million split 60-40. You get 14, I get 21. Turks and Caicos by February. Dustin to Maria, November 18th. You sure the old man will sign Maria to Dustin? November 18th. I'll do it at the wedding. Public pressure, 300 witnesses. He won't humiliate his son. He'll sign. I watched Matthew read them, watched his face crumble. Another message appeared. Maria to Dustin, December 2nd. Matthew is so stupid. He believes everything. I could tell him the moon is made of cheese and he'd ask what kind. Matthew made a sound between a gasp and a sob. Kevin Riley moved closer, ready to catch him if he fell. One final message. Maria to Dustin, December 20. His dad is the real target. 15 condos equals we're set for life. Matthew's just the key. Silence. Just the ocean and someone crying softly. 1,247 messages, I said. 6 months of planning, every lie, every move. My mind flashed back to February, the first time Matthew brought her home. She'd teared up at Catherine's photo on the mantel. I lost my parents in a car accident, she'd said, voice breaking. Foster care in Boston. I never had a family like this. Matthew had pulled her close. You do now. I'd felt something then, doubt like a pebble in my shoe. But I'd pushed it down. By April, she'd started isolating him. Kevin keeps asking about my past, she'd told Matthew one night. Like he's interrogating me. Within weeks, Matthew canceled poker night, then Saturdays. By May, he'd stopped returning Kevin's calls altogether. I'd noticed, told myself it was normal. Young love. Catherine and I had been the same way once. Except Catherine had been real. A commotion erupted at the back of the room. Security moved toward a man in the last row, Dustin Hart. He bolted for the side exit, but guards blocked him. Within seconds, they had him by the arms. Let me go, I'm just a guest. You're Dustin Hart, I said into the microphone. And you're not going anywhere. They dragged him toward the front. He caught Maria's eye. Maria, what the hell did you do? She didn't answer, just stared like she'd seen a ghost. Matthew looked between them, Maria in her wedding dress, Dustin in a cheap suit. Was any of it real? His voice was raw, barely above a whisper. Maria reached for him. Matthew, Don't. He stepped back, nearly tripping. Don't touch me. She started crying, real tears this time, but not for him. For herself. For the con that had just died in front of 300 witnesses. I looked out at the crowd. Phones everywhere recording. This would be viral by tonight. Maria Santos would never reinvent herself again. Good. I raised the microphone. And she didn't just steal identities, I said. She stole money from my son. The ballroom felt smaller now, tighter. Like the walls had moved closer, while everyone watched Maria Santos stand there in her wedding dress, mascara streaking her cheeks, her carefully constructed world collapsing in real time. I clicked the remote again. A new document filled the screen, a wire transfer receipt. Chase Bank, dated June 15th. $480,000. Sender Matthew Donovan. Recipient Coastal Properties Fund, LLC, registered address in Wilmington, Delaware. Last June. I said, Maria introduced Matthew to what she called an exclusive real estate investment opportunity. The Coastal Properties Fund. High returns, low risk, managed by her trusted associate, a man named Mark Stevens. I clicked. A photo appeared, Dustin Hart shaking Matthew's hand across a restaurant table. The timestamp read June 8th. Matthew looked eager, hopeful. Dustin looked like a snake sizing up a mouse. Except Mark Stevens doesn't exist, I continued. That's Dustin Hart using a fake name. The Coastal Properties Fund doesn't exist either. It's a shell corporation registered in Delaware with a P.O. box and no assets. Matthew transferred $480,000 over 4 months. The money was laundered through cryptocurrency wallets and disappeared. On the screen, fake quarterly statements showing 20% returns. Official-looking letterhead. All of it fiction. The Securities and Exchange Commission opened an investigation 3 weeks ago, I said. They've traced the funds to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Matthew won't be getting that money back. Matthew hadn't moved. He stood frozen at the altar, staring at the screen like it was written in a language he couldn't understand. Kevin Riley had his hand on Matthew's shoulder, keeping him upright. My mind went back to June, the night Matthew came to me with the investment prospectus. He'd been so excited, spreading papers across my desk pointing to projected returns. "Dad, look at this. Isabella knows the fund manager personally. It's a sure thing." I'd picked up the prospectus, scanned the details. Something felt off, the language too vague, the promises too generous. "Son, let Arthur look at this. Have our attorney review the contract before you sign anything." Matthew's face had darkened. "Why don't you trust me to make my own decisions?" "It's not about trust." "Yes, it is." He'd stood up, gathering the papers. "Isabella said you'd do this. She said you'd find a way to undermine me, to make me feel like I'm still a kid who needs Daddy's approval for everything." Behind him in the doorway, Maria had appeared, tears rolling down her face, looking at me like I'd just struck her. "I'm sorry, Alexander," she'd said, voice trembling. "I shouldn't have encouraged Matthew to invest. I didn't realize you wouldn't trust my judgment." "Maria, that's not—" But Matthew had already taken her hand, pulling her close. "No, Isabella. You were right. He wants to control my life forever." He'd turned to me. "I'm 35 years old, Dad. I don't need your permission." "Fine," I'd said, knowing I'd lost that battle. "You decide." He'd transferred the first 100,000 the next day. By July, I'd started noticing changes. Matthew would mention slowing down the investments, taking a pause, then Maria would go silent. 2 days of unreturned calls, ignored texts. Matthew would panic, showing up at her apartment, apologizing for doubts he hadn't even voiced. Then suddenly she'd be back cooking his favorite meals, planning weekend getaways, affectionate in ways that made him light up like a kid on Christmas morning. I'd watched him learn the pattern: make Isabella happy, receive love. Question Isabella, lose everything. Classic intermittent reinforcement. The same technique casinos use to keep gamblers at slot machines. I clicked the remote again. A new set of documents appeared: credit card statements. Donovan Properties corporate card. Matthew's name listed as an authorized user, but my name as the account owner. Highlighted charges jumped off the screen. May 18th, Neiman Marcus. $28,000, June 3rd. ATM withdrawal. $5,000, June 10th. ATM withdrawal. $5,000, June 24th. ATM withdrawal. $5,000, July 8th, Tiffany & Company. $22,000, July 29th. Best Buy. $18,000, August 15th, the Ritz-Carlton, Miami. $12,000, the list went on. And on. Between May and September, I said, someone racked up $125,000 on our company credit card. Designer handbags, jewelry, electronics, 5-star hotels. Maria Santos using the card Matthew gave her access to. I clicked again. Screenshots of eBay and Poshmark seller accounts filled the screen. Username luxresale_Miami. Photos of Chanel bags, Tiffany bracelets, MacBook Pros, all matching the credit card purchases, all listed for sale at 70% of retail value. She resold everything online, I said. They turned $125,000 of merchandise into cash, then transferred it to Dustin Hart through Zelle and Venmo. We have the transaction records, every payment, every tracking number. A woman in the fourth row stood up and left, shaking her head. Matthew's legs finally gave out. He dropped into one of the chairs on the platform, head in his hands. Kevin crouched beside him, whispering something I couldn't hear. I advanced the slide. A phone call log appeared, my personal cell, September 12th. Call duration 14 minutes. That's when Chase Bank called me, I said. Fraud alert. Unusual activity on the corporate account. $28,000 at Neiman Marcus in one transaction. Multiple cash withdrawals. I called Matthew immediately. I could still hear his voice on that call. Defensive. Angry. Dad, I'm using it for investments. Isabella has financial experience. I'll pay the company back when the fund matures. Matthew, this isn't about the money. This is about you not trusting me. Not trusting her. Isabella said this would happen. She said you'd find some reason to sabotage us. Son, I'm asking you to slow down. Just let me have Arthur look at. I'm done asking for permission. He'd hung up. That night, I'd called Frank Morrison. Hired him the next morning. 3 months of investigation compressed into the presentation, now unfolding in front of 300 witnesses. Maria was screaming now. He's lying, Matthew. He's fabricated all of this. He hired people to. The bank records are public, I said calmly. The SEC investigation is public. The eBay account is still active. Anyone can verify this. Several guests had their phones out already searching. I heard someone say, "Holy shit, the eBay account is real. Look." Matthew raised his head. His face was gray eyes hollow. $600,000. 605,000, I corrected. 480 in fake investments, 125 in stolen merchandise. All of it gone. I looked out at the crowd, then back at Maria. But that wasn't enough for you, was it? I said. $605,000 was just the appetizer. The real target was always the 15 condominiums. $35 million. Enough to disappear forever. Enough that no one would ever find you again. Maria's mouth opened, closed. No words came. Matthew stood slowly, unsteady on his feet. He looked at her. Really looked at her. And I saw the moment he finally understood. Not just what she'd done, but who she was. Who she'd always been. You never loved me, he whispered. She reached for him. He stepped back. You never loved me. The silence after Matthew's words hung in the air like smoke. 300 people watched him stand there broken, staring at the woman in the wedding dress who'd just destroyed his life for money. I clicked the remote one final time. A new document appeared, casino transaction records. Seminole, Hard Rock, Hollywood, Florida. Pages and pages of them scrolling across the screen. Dates spanning from March of 2020 through November of 2022. Amounts highlighted in red. This is why she needed your money. Matthew, I said, Maria Santos has a gambling problem. The screen showed withdrawal records. $20,000, $50,000, $80,000. On and on. High roller tables, progressive slot machines. Losses mounting month after month, year after year. Between 2020 and 2022, she lost over $800,000 at this casino alone, I said. She borrowed from loan sharks in Miami to cover her debts. $400,000 at 15% interest per month. Compounding. I let that sink in. 15% monthly interest meant her debt doubled every 5 months. 400,000 became 800,000 in less than a year if she couldn't pay. Another document appeared, text messages between Maria and a contact saved as V. V to Maria. October 2nd, 2022. You're 3 months behind. My people are losing patience. Maria to V. October 2, 2022. I need 2 more months. I'm getting married. His family has property. V to Maria, October 15th, 2022. 2 months. That's it. After that, we handle this differently. Maria to V. November 20th, 2022. I'll have it by February. 35 million in real estate. I'll give you your 400,000 plus interest. Just give me until February. Matthew's head snapped up. They were threatening her. Yes, I said. Loan sharks don't take late payments lightly. She was desperate, running out of time. That's why she pushed for a winter wedding. That's why she demanded the condos be signed over today. She had a deadline. I advanced the slide. A credit report appeared, Maria's real one, not the fabricated version she'd shown Matthew. Outstanding debts highlighted $180,000 across 7 maxed-out credit cards. Another line item, $620,000 civil judgment from a previous fraud case unpaid. Total debt. I said $1.2 million. She needed our 15 condominiums to save her own life. Maria's legs buckled. She grabbed the altar railing to stay upright. For the first time since this started, I saw genuine fear in her eyes, not fear of exposure, fear of what came next when she walked out of here with nothing. Alexander, she said, her voice raw. Please, you don't understand. Those people, they'll kill me. I didn't want to do this. I had no choice. You had choices, I said. You chose to gamble. You chose to borrow from criminals. You chose to target my son instead of getting help. I looked at her. You made your choices. Now you live with them. Movement at the back of the ballroom caught my eye. The main doors opened. Detective Lisa Martinez walked in shield, clipped to her belt, followed by 4 uniformed officers. I'd been coordinating with her for 3 weeks, sharing Frank Morrison's evidence, building the case, timing the arrest for maximum impact. She'd been waiting outside, listening through the security team's radio, ready for my signal. This was it. The crowd parted as the officers moved through. Guests stumbled over each other, getting out of the way, phones still recording. Detective Martinez climbed the steps to the altar, her face calm and professional. A Maria Elena Santos, she said, her voice carrying across the ballroom. Dustin Alexander Hart, you're both under arrest. Maria's face went white. No, please. Detective Martinez didn't hesitate. She pulled Maria's hands behind her back, snapped handcuffs around her wrists. Another officer did the same to Dustin, who'd gone silent. His earlier bravado evaporated. You have the right to remain silent, Detective Martinez began. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. The Miranda warning echoed through the ballroom, formal and final. Charges include identity theft, wire fraud, grand theft over $100,000, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Detective Martinez continued. Do you understand these rights, as I've explained them to you? Maria wasn't listening. She twisted toward Matthew, tears streaming down her face, mascara black rivers against her skin. Matthew, she screamed. Matthew, please, I love you. Tell them I love you. Matthew didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there staring at the floor, his best man's hand still on his shoulder. Matthew, please, don't let them do this, baby, please. An officer took her other arm. They started walking her toward the aisle. Her cathedral train dragging behind her the Vera Wang gown she'd spent $30,000 on, now wrinkled and stained with tears. Matthew, Matthew, he finally looked up, met her eyes, and said nothing. They led her past the rows of guests, past colleagues from Donovan Properties, past Matthew's college friends, past family members who'd flown in from 3 states to watch him get married. Everyone filming, everyone watching. The woman who'd almost stolen $35 million being walked out in handcuffs and a wedding dress. Dustin followed behind her, head down, silent. They'd been so close. 3 more minutes, and they would have had me signing transfer documents. 3 more minutes, and they'd be planning their exit to Turks and Caicos. Instead, they were going to jail. The doors closed behind them. The ballroom fell silent, the kind of silence that follows a bomb when everyone's ears are still ringing and no one knows what to say. I looked around. 300 people in formal wear standing among scattered programs and overturned champagne glasses. The string quartet had stopped playing an hour ago. The flowers were still perfect. The ocean still visible through the windows. But the wedding was long over. I walked down from the altar, my shoes clicking against marble. Matthew hadn't moved. He stood frozen where Maria had left him, staring at the doors she'd been dragged through. I stopped beside him, put my hand on his shoulder. "Son," I said quietly. "We need to talk." The door clicked shut, sealing out the ballroom chaos. The private suite was small, cream walls, 2 armchairs, a window overlooking the Atlantic. Matthew stood in the center, back to me, shoulders rising and falling too fast. Then he spun around. "What the hell did you just do?" His voice cracked between shout and sob. "Do you have any idea what you just put me through?" I stayed by the door. "Matthew, you investigated her, hired private investigators without telling me." He stepped forward, face flushed. 300 people just watched you humiliate me. I didn't humiliate you. I saved you. From being happy, Isabella loved me. Her name is Maria Santos, and she didn't. You never liked her. His hands shook. From the first dinner, you looked at her like she didn't belong. You never accepted anyone replacing Mom. That's what this is about. The accusations stung. Your mother has nothing to do with this. Doesn't she? Isabella said you'd sabotage us. She was right. I didn't fabricate anything. Then why didn't you tell me? He was shouting. Why blindside me at my wedding? Because you wouldn't have listened. You didn't try. I tried twice. My voice stayed level. September, after Chase called about the corporate card, I asked about the $125,000 in charges. You told me to trust your judgment and hung up. His jaw clenched. October, I suggested Arthur review the investment contract. You said I was controlling your life. I paused. You said Isabella warned you I'd do exactly that. He opened his mouth, closed it. So, yes, I investigated. Because when the bank called about suspicious charges and you defended her, I had to know if you were safe. I walked to the table, set down the leather folder. 3 inches thick. This is why I didn't tell you, I said, opening it. Because you loved her, and love makes us blind. I spread contents across the table. 17 photographs spilled out, Maria and Dustin kissing. His arm around her waist, champagne glasses raised, every photo time-stamped. September 23rd, October 7th, December 28th. 3 weeks before your engagement party, I said. She was with him. Matthew stared, face pale. I laid out court records. Orange County, 2017. Fraud, $180,000. Miami-Dade, 2019. Identity theft. Active warrant, 2021. Matthew picked up a document, hands trembling. And these. I pulled out printed text messages. 1,247 messages between Maria and Dustin. I held up a highlighted section. Maria to Dustin. November 10th. Matthew is so stupid. He believes everything. Matthew flinched. Maria to Dustin. December 2nd. His dad is the real target. 15 condos equals set for life. Matthew's just the key. He took the pages, started reading, flipping faster eyes, scanning words that dismantled 10 months of belief. Once I get the condos, we're gone. The wedding is perfect. Public pressure. Pretending to love him is exhausting. His legs gave out. He sank into a chair, papers scattering, pressed palms against his eyes. I loved her, he whispered. God, I'm such an idiot. You're not. She called me stupid, in writing. While he couldn't finish. I knelt beside him. Matthew, you're not an idiot. Maria Santos is a professional. She's done this to 5 men before you. She finds vulnerabilities, your mother's death, your need for family. She exploits them. I should have seen it. How she knew exactly what to say, when to cry. She's perfected this for a decade. You saw it. I suspected. I didn't know until Frank Morrison gave me proof. Even then, I hoped I was wrong. He looked up, eyes red. When did you know? 3 weeks ago, December 20th. Photos, texts, records, everything. I picked up a page. I wanted to tell you, but you'd have warned her. She'd disappear, and you'd wonder if I was lying. So you let the wedding happen. I let her think she'd won, so she'd show up. So you'd see truth you couldn't deny. His throat worked. Was any of it real? This was the question I dreaded, the one I couldn't soften. No, son. She didn't love you. She loved 15 condos worth $35 million. You were the path, not the goal. He made a sound between gasp and sob, the sound of something vital being torn out. I pulled him close, arms around him like when he was 8 and fell off his bike, like the night Catherine died, and we held each other in her hospital room. I'm sorry, I said. I'm so damn sorry. His shoulders shook silently. We stayed that way, ocean rolling beyond the window. Somewhere staff cleaned, guests posted videos, the story going viral. But in that moment, just us, father and son. Eventually, Matthew pulled back, wiped his eyes. I need to know everything, he said, voice hoarse. Everything she said, everything she did, how she played me, what I missed. He looked at me. I need to understand how I was fooled. 3 days had passed since the wedding that never was. The video had gone viral, millions of views across social media platforms, endless shares and comments. I'd stopped reading them after the first 100. Matthew sat across from me in my office at Donovan Properties, nursing cold coffee. He hadn't shaved. His tie was loose. But he'd shown up, outside Fort Lauderdale, sprawled under January sun. 15 condominiums Maria Santos had tried to steal. But there was something she didn't know about. There's something I need to tell you, I said. I opened my desk drawer, pulled out a folder marked Catherine Donovan Trust. Private. Slid it across. When your mother died, she left you a trust fund. $8 million. I've been managing it for 8 years. It's grown to $12 million. Matthew stared. 12 million. In your mother's name. Completely separate from the condos, from anything Maria could discover. I opened the folder, showed quarterly statements. I never told you to protect you from exactly what almost happened. If Maria had known, she never would have stopped at 15 condominiums. You hid $12 million from me. I protected $12 million for you. Your mother wanted you to have security. I wasn't going to let some con artist take that. He was quiet. Then, how did you figure it out, really? I pulled out the investigation file. Thicker, heavier. 5 weeks. 3 private investigation firms. $60,000. I spread documents across the desk. Week 1. Early October. After you hung up about the chase alert, I called Frank Morrison, former FBI, 30 years experience. Background check on Isabella Green from Boston. I tapped the first report. He found nothing. No birth certificate, no school records. Isabella Green didn't exist before 2015. Matthew leaned forward. Week 2, mid-October. Second firm, Rodriguez and Associates. Facial recognition. I slid over a comparison sheet. Do a match Maria Elena Santos criminal record 5 aliases going back to 2012. That's when they found Dustin Hart. 5 photos of them together, 2017 through 2022. Jesus, Matthew whispered. Week 3, late October. Digital forensics cybertrace solutions. With Detective Martinez's help, we got a warrant. I showed him the signed warrant. 1,247 text messages between Maria and Dustin. Deleted texts, encrypted files. That's when we discovered the gambling debt, $1.2 million. She was desperate. His jaw tightened. Week 4, early November. I took everything to Detective Martinez. She brought in FBI wire fraud crosses state lines. I showed police documents. They built the criminal case. Week 5, mid-November. SEC opened their investigation. We tracked previous victims, 5 of them. 1 agreed to cooperate. I gathered documents. By then we had everything. Airtight. Matthew looked up. Why didn't you tell me in November? Because you loved her. If I'd told you, what would you have done? He worked through it. I would have warned her. She would have disappeared. Exactly. The wedding was the only way. She had to demand the condos publicly. 300 witnesses. You had to see her true colors with your own eyes. You let 300 people watch. I let 300 people witness you being saved. A knock. Arthur Campbell stepped in, our family attorney, 20 years, silver-haired and sharp. Gentlemen, he said, settling beside Matthew. We need to discuss strategy. He pulled out documents. Civil suit, $605,000 stolen plus damages. We're asking $3.2 million total. Will we get it? Matthew asked. Probably not. Maria has no assets. But we file anyway, judgment on record. And criminal, that's where we win. State charges identity theft, grand theft. 5 to 15 years. Federal charges wire fraud, conspiracy, 10 to 20 more. Prosecutor is confident. Bail. $500,000 each. Neither can post it. Broward County Jail pending trial. He looked at Matthew. Trial starts next week. They refused the plea deal. Plea deal. 7 years, drop federal charges. Maria refused. She's pleading not guilty. Claims you gave money willingly, that Alexander fabricated evidence. She's lying. Of course. But we prove it in court. Arthur pulled out a witness list. We need you to testify. Victim impact statement. Tell the jury what she did, how she manipulated you. 2 to 3 hours. Her attorney will try to make you look complicit. I wasn't. I know, but he'll try. Arthur leaned forward. Matthew, you don't have to do this. We have enough evidence to convict without your testimony. But if you're willing, your story is powerful. It puts a human face on the crime. Matthew was quiet for a long moment. Outside traffic hummed along Las Olas Boulevard. The office clock ticked. Arthur waited patient. Finally, Matthew straightened in his chair, looked at Arthur, and gave a single nod. Arthur closed his briefcase, stood. "They're going to trial next week," he said, meeting Matthew's eyes. "Matthew, we need you to testify." 1 week later, I sat beside Matthew in Arthur Campbell's conference room on the 23rd floor of a glass tower in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Through the windows, the city spread out below. Cruise ships docked at Port Everglades, the intracoastal waterway glittering in afternoon sun. Arthur's office was all dark wood and leather law books lining the walls, the kind of place that cost $600 an hour and was worth every penny. Matthew looked better than he had 3 days ago. He'd shaved. His suit was pressed, but there were still shadows under his eyes, the kind that come from nights spent staring at ceilings, replaying every conversation, every lie, every moment you'd been too blind to see. Arthur spread documents across the mahogany table. "Bail hearing was yesterday," he said. "Both defendants, Maria Santos and Dustin Hart, bail set at $500,000 each." "Can they pay it?" Matthew asked. "No. Maria has negative net worth, $1.2 million in debt. Dustin has about $8,000 in a checking account." Arthur slid over the court order. The judge ruled them flight risks. Previous warrant fake identities documented plans to flee to the Caribbean. They'll remain in Broward County Jail until trial. Matthew nodded slowly, some small part of him relaxing, knowing she couldn't disappear. "Formal charges were filed this morning." Arthur continued, opening a thick binder. "State of Florida is prosecuting identity theft, first-degree felony, grand theft, first-degree felony, and organized fraud, second-degree felony. Combined, those carry 5 to 15 years in state prison." He turned the page. "Federal charges filed separately: wire fraud conspiracy to commit fraud and money laundering. That's another 10 to 20 years in federal prison served consecutively with state time." "Consecutively?" Matthew's voice was quiet. "Not at the same time." "Not at the same time. If she's convicted on all counts, which the prosecutor believes she will be, Maria Santos is looking at 15 to 35 years total." Arthur met his eyes. "She'll be in her 60s before she's eligible for parole." The number hung in the air. 35 years. Maria would be 67 years old, older than I was now. "And Dustin?" I asked. "Similar timeline. Federal charges hit him harder because the shell corporation was registered in his name. Prosecutors are pushing for the maximum." Arthur pulled out another section of the binder. "Now let's talk about evidence. The prosecution has organized the digital evidence into categories. 1,247 text messages between Maria and Dustin over 6 months. He spread out printed screenshots organized with colored tabs. Category 1, target identification. 40 messages. These show Maria researching your family, your assets specifically, the 15 condominiums." He pointed to highlighted sections. "His dad owns half of Fort Lauderdale. Properties on Las Olas Harbor Beach, Victoria Park. Estimated 35 million total." Matthew stared at the words. His life, their life, reduced to a target assessment. Category 2, manipulation tactics. 180 messages. This is where they discuss how to control you. Arthur's voice was clinical, professional, but I saw the anger beneath. When to cry. When to withdraw affection. How to isolate you from friends and family. Quote, "Make him choose between me and his father. Once he picks me, we own him." Matthew's jaw tightened. Category 3, Financial Planning. 95 messages about splitting the $35 million. 60-40 split, Dustin gets 14 million, Maria gets 21. Where to sell the condos quickly? Which offshore banks to use? Category 4, Exit Strategy. 60 messages. They had fake passports ready. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. Quote, by February we're gone. New names, new country. Matthew will never find us. Arthur closed that section. The financial evidence corroborates everything. Wire transfers from Matthew to Coastal Properties Fund, $480,000 over 4 months. Credit card statements showing $125,000 in charges. Sales records from the resale accounts, $89,000 revenue from stolen merchandise. Zelle and Venmo transfers $95,000 sent from Maria to Dustin. He pulled out a witness list. Prosecution will call several witnesses. Bank representatives from Chase and Wells Fargo to verify the fraud. Frank Morrison to explain the investigation. Detective Martinez to present the arrest and evidence chain. And he looked at Matthew. They want you to give a victim impact statement. What does that involve? You tell the jury what she did, how she manipulated you. The financial damage, yes, but more importantly, the emotional damage. You'll be cross-examined by her attorney, so you need to be prepared for hostile questions. Matthew was quiet for a moment. Who else? Who else what? Who else is testifying you said there were previous victims? Arthur nodded. George Patterson, retired accountant, 74 years old. Maria scammed him out of $400,000 in 2019 using a nearly identical playbook. Different name, she called herself Isabella Martinez then, but same tactics. Fake investment opportunity, fake romantic relationship disappeared with his money. 400,000, Matthew repeated, from a retiree. His and his late wife's life savings. Arthur's expression darkened. He's willing to testify, wants to make sure she can't do this to anyone else. I watched Matthew process that. He wasn't alone. This wasn't about him being stupid or gullible. This was about a predator with a pattern, a professional who'd been doing this for over a decade. There's something else, Arthur said. The prosecution offered a plea deal yesterday. Maria's public defender brought it to her. 7 years in state prison, drop all federal charges, full restitution required. It's a generous offer given the evidence. And, Matthew asked. She rejected it. She's pleading not guilty, claims you gave her the money willingly, that Alexander fabricated evidence out of spite. Arthur leaned back. Which means we're going to trial, full trial, jury witnesses, media coverage, everything. Matthew looked at me. I kept my expression neutral, let him decide. Good, he said finally. I want her to face a jury. I want 12 people to hear what she did. I don't want her getting any kind of deal. Arthur studied him. You understand what that means? You'll have to testify. You'll have to sit in that courtroom and listen to her attorney call you a liar, suggest you were complicit. Try to make the jury think you're just a rich kid with buyer's remorse. I understand. And you're still willing. Matthew's hands were steady on the table. She destroyed my life for money. She would have taken everything, the condos, the trust fund Dad hid to protect me, everything, and disappeared. I want her to face the consequences. All of them. Arthur closed the binder. Then we prepare. Trial starts in 2 weeks. Between now and then, we go through everything, your testimony, cross-examination, practice, courtroom procedures. He pulled out a business card, slid it across to Matthew. But first, next week, I want you to meet George Patterson. Hear his story. Understand that what happened to you has happened before, and it wasn't your fault. Matthew picked up the card. George Patterson, it read. Phone number below. He lost $400,000 in 2019. Arthur said quietly. Matthew, you need to hear what he has to say. 2 days later, I sat beside Matthew at a corner table in a small cafe on Las Olas Boulevard, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls where tourists sipped overpriced lattes and locals read newspapers. Through the window, palm trees swayed in the January breeze. Across the street, a boutique was already advertising Valentine's Day specials. Life moved on whether you were ready or not. Matthew hadn't touched his coffee. He kept checking his phone notifications lighting up the screen every few seconds. Messages, calls, friend requests from strangers. The video from the wedding had hit 15 million views in 72 hours. Every news outlet in South Florida had run the story. Some national ones, too. He's late, Matthew said, glancing at the door. He's not late. We're early. Matthew's leg bounced under the table. Nervous energy with nowhere to go. Then the door opened, and an older man stepped inside. 74, maybe 75, with white hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck. He wore khakis and a faded polo shirt, the uniform of Florida retirees. His eyes scanned the cafe until they found us. Recognition flickered across his face. George Patterson walked over slowly like his joints hurt. When he reached our table, he extended his hand to Matthew first. You must be Matthew, he said. His voice was gentle, kind. I'm George. Matthew stood, shook his hand. Thank you for meeting us. Thank you for being willing to listen. George turned to me. Alexander, Arthur's told me a lot about you. We sat. A waitress brought George coffee without him asking. Apparently, he was a regular here. He wrapped both hands around the mug like he needed the warmth, even though it was 70 degrees outside. I don't usually talk about this, George said, looking at Matthew. Took me 3 years before I could say it out loud without feeling like I wanted to disappear. But Arthur said you might need to hear it. So here we are. Matthew leaned forward. When did you meet her? March of 2019. I was 69 years old. My wife Nancy had passed away the year before. Cancer. 42 years of marriage gone in 6 months. George's voice was steady, but I saw his jaw tighten. I was lonely. Stupid lonely. The kind where you eat cereal for dinner because cooking for one person feels pointless. He took a sip of coffee. Someone at my church suggested I try online dating, said it was what people did now. So I made a profile, posted a photo, felt ridiculous doing it. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. 2 weeks later, I got a message from a woman named Isabella Martinez, 30 years old, beautiful, said she loved my profile, thought I seemed genuine. We talked for a few days, then met for coffee. Matthew's hands were flat on the table, listening. First date was at an art gallery downtown. She knew everything about the paintings, who the artists were, what movements they represented. She made me feel smart for asking questions. Made me feel young. George's voice softened. By the end of the night, she was holding my hand, telling me how rare it was to meet someone who really listened. I watched Matthew's face. He'd gone very still. We dated for 3 months, George continued. She was attentive, thoughtful, remembered everything I told her about Nancy, about my career, about my kids. She'd call just to check in, bring me soup when I had a cold. I actually thought I'd found someone who cared about an old widower. What happened? Matthew asked quietly. June. 3 months in, she came over for dinner, brought wine, and told me about an investment opportunity. A resort development project in Key West. Her business partner was putting together a group of investors. Minimum buy-in was $400,000, but the returns would be incredible 25% annually. George set down his mug. She said we'd do it together, that this was our future, that after the first year's returns came in, we'd use the profits to travel. See Europe. All the places Nancy and I never got to. His voice cracked. She made me believe we had a life ahead of us. And you gave her the money, Matthew said. Not a question. I liquidated my 401k, withdrew from savings accounts. Every dollar Nancy and I had saved over 40 years of work, $400,000. I wire transferred it to an investment company in Wyoming. He looked at Matthew. 1 week later, her phone was disconnected. The address she'd given me, an apartment in Coconut Grove, didn't exist. The investment company was a shell corporation registered to a P.O. box. The money was gone. Matthew's hands had curled into fists. I filed a police report with Miami-Dade. They investigated, found her real name, Maria Elena Santos. Found out she had a criminal record. Found out she'd done this before. They got a warrant, but by then she'd disappeared. She was convicted in absentia in 2019. I got a judgment for $400,000 plus interest. George laughed bitterly. Might as well be a judgment for $4 million. She doesn't have any money, never will. Did you get anything back? Matthew asked. $43,000. They seized her car, some jewelry, sold it at auction. That's what I got. $43,000 out of $400,000. He met Matthew's eyes. I spent 3 years wanting to die. I'd sit in my house, the house Nancy and I bought in 1987, and think about how I'd failed her, how I'd taken everything we built and handed it to a con artist because I was lonely and desperate and stupid. You're not stupid, Matthew said, his voice rough. That's what my kids said. That's what the therapist said. But I didn't believe them. Because how could I not see it? How could I be that blind? George leaned forward. But here's what I finally learned, Matthew. We weren't blind. We were targeted. Maria Santos is a professional. She studies people. She finds the cracks, your mother's death, my wife's death, and she pries them open. She doesn't prey on stupid people. She preys on trusting people. Matthew's eyes were wet. You asked me how I moved on, George said. I didn't. Not really. I just learned to live with it, to forgive myself a little more each day, to understand that predators exist and sometimes they find us, and that's not our fault. Matthew's phone buzzed on the table. Another notification. He glanced at it, then silenced the phone entirely. It's been like this for 3 days, he said. Calls, messages, people I haven't talked to in years suddenly want to check in. Strangers send me friend requests. Someone posted the wedding video with commentary, and it has 15 million views. I can't go anywhere without being recognized. George nodded. After my story hit the local news, I got hate mail. People called me an idiot, said I deserved it. But I also got letters from other victims, dozens of them. People she'd scammed. People other con artists had scammed. They thanked me for speaking up, said it made them feel less alone. My dad hired a PR person, Matthew said, to manage the media. Good. You'll need that. George pulled a business card from his wallet, just his name and phone number handwritten, slid it across the table. Matthew, if you need to talk anytime, 3 a.m, middle of the day, whenever, call me. Because the truth is, only people who've been through this really understand. Your friends, your family, they'll try, but they won't get it. Not the way we do. Matthew picked up the card, stared at it like it was a lifeline. Thank you, he said, for telling me. He stopped, unable to finish. For letting you know you're not alone, George finished. That's what we do for each other now. We survive. And we make damn sure she can't do this to anyone else. 2 weeks after meeting George Patterson, Matthew sat in Dr. Sharon Reeves's office in Coral Springs, staring at a painting of a beach at sunset. The office was designed to feel safe, soft lighting, comfortable chairs, a small fountain trickling in the corner. Nothing clinical. Nothing that made you feel like you were broken, but Matthew felt broken anyway. Dr. Reeves was in her mid-50s with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair pulled into a loose bun. She'd come highly recommended by Arthur Campbell, specialized in trauma from financial and romantic fraud. Apparently, there were enough victims to make it a specialty. "Tell me what brings you here," she said, her voice gentle. So Matthew told her. Everything. The wedding, the exposure, the $605,000, the text messages calling him stupid, how he'd loved someone who never existed, how he couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't look at himself in the mirror without feeling like an idiot. Dr. Reeves listened, took notes, didn't interrupt. When he finished, she set down her pen and leaned forward. "Matthew, what Maria Santos did to you has a name. Several names, actually, and none of them are about you being stupid." Over the next 3 sessions, she walked him through it. Session 2. Identifying the pattern, love bombing. Dr. Reeves said, writing on a whiteboard, months 1 through 3, overwhelming affection. Constant texts, gifts, declarations of, "You're my soulmate." She idealized you, made you feel like the center of her universe. That's not love. That's a technique. Matthew remembered the first 3 months. Isabella Maria texting him good morning every day, bringing him coffee at work, telling him she'd never met anyone like him. Isolation. Dr. Reeves continued, months 4 through 6, she separated you from your support system, your friends, your father. She made you doubt them. They don't understand us. Your dad doesn't trust you. Sound familiar? He nodded. Kevin, the poker nights he'd canceled, the distance from his father. Gaslighting. Months 6 through 9, making you doubt your own reality. You're overreacting. Your dad is controlling. Your friends are jealous. She rewrote your perception of everyone who loved you. And financial exploitation, Dr. Reeves said quietly. Once she'd isolated you, once you trusted her completely, she drained your resources, the investment, the credit card, always framed as our future, never just hers. Matthew sat back. So I was. What a target. You were systematically manipulated by someone who does this professionally. She studied you, Matthew, found your vulnerabilities, losing your mother, wanting family, and exploited them. Dr. Reeves met his eyes. This isn't about you being gullible. It's about her being a predator. Session 4, the grief question. How do I trust anyone again? Matthew asked. You learn to trust yourself first, Dr. Reeves said. To listen to red flags, to move slowly, to verify, not just believe. She handed him a journal. I want you to write about the signs you missed, not to blame yourself, to learn, to recognize patterns. And the pain. His voice cracked. See, when does that stop? You're not just grieving Maria. You're grieving the future you imagined. The wedding, the children growing old together. That's what makes this uniquely painful. You're mourning someone who never existed. Matthew stared at the journal in his hands. The pain doesn't disappear, Dr. Reeves said gently, but it changes. It becomes livable. That night over dinner at my house, Matthew repeated that phrase to me. Livable. I recognized the word. I'd used it myself years ago after Catherine died. Your mother and I used to sit on the back porch every Sunday morning, I said. Coffee, newspaper, just being together. After she died, I couldn't go out there for a year. Then one day I did. And it hurt. But it was livable. Matthew looked at me. Do you still miss her? Every single day. I met his eyes. But the pain isn't what it was. It's gentler now. More like an old friend who visits sometimes. He nodded slowly. We ate in silence for a while. I didn't push. Just let him be. Week 3. Small steps. Matthew returned to work part-time. Just mornings handling paperwork, avoiding client meetings. His colleagues didn't ask questions, just said they were glad he was back. That helped. Week 4, repairing friendships. He met Kevin Riley for lunch at a sports bar on Federal Highway. Kevin ordered them both burgers, and beers didn't mention the wedding until Matthew brought it up. I'm sorry, Matthew said, for shutting you out, for not listening when you tried to warn me. Kevin shook his head. Dude, you don't need to apologize. She fooled all of us. I liked her. I thought she was good for you. He took a drink. You're my best friend. That doesn't change because some psycho conned you. Matthew felt something loosen in his chest. Permission to forgive himself, maybe? Or just the reminder that he wasn't alone. Week 5. Physical recovery. He started going to the gym 3 times a week early mornings when it was empty. Lifting weights, running on the treadmill, letting his body burn off the anger and shame. It helped. Sleep came easier. Appetite returned. Small things, but they mattered. Trial preparation. Arthur's office became a second home. They practiced testimony for hours, Arthur playing the role of Maria's defense attorney, asking hostile questions designed to rattle Matthew. Mr. Donovan, isn't it true you voluntarily gave Miss Santos access to your corporate credit card? I gave my fiancée access believing she was honest. I did not give her permission to steal $125,000. But you never checked the statements, did you? For 4 months. I trusted her. That was my mistake. Or was it convenient? Maybe you wanted her to have the money. Maybe you're lying now because you're embarrassed. That's not true. Keep your voice steady. Arthur interrupted, stepping out of character. The jury needs to see you calm, confident. If you get defensive, they'll wonder if you're hiding something. Matthew practiced, again and again, until he could answer the worst questions without flinching. Session 6, are you ready? Trial starts next week, Dr. Reeves said. You'll see Maria again. You'll hear her attorney attack your character. The jury will be watching. Media will be present. Matthew, are you ready? He thought about George Patterson, about the 5 other victims Arthur had mentioned, about the people Maria would target next if she walked free. I have to be, he said. Other people need to be protected from her. Doctor, Reeves studied him. You've made remarkable progress. But this will be hard. I know. And you're still willing. Yes. That evening, I drove Matthew home from Arthur's office. He was quiet, staring out the window at the city lights. You don't have to do this, I said. Arthur said the evidence is strong enough without your testimony. I know. Matthew turned to look at me. But if I don't speak up, who will? If I don't warn people what she's capable of, how will they know to be careful? I felt pride swell in my chest. My son, who'd been shattered 2 months ago, was putting himself back together, not just for himself, but for others. Dad, he said quietly. I'm ready. I need to do this. 1 month after Maria Santos and Dustin Hart were arrested at the Ritz-Carlton, Arthur Campbell called an emergency meeting. I need you both in my office this afternoon, he'd said over the phone. The prosecutor made an offer. We need to discuss it. Now Matthew and I sat across from Arthur's mahogany desk, late February sun streaming through the windows. Arthur looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from reading legal briefs until midnight and starting again at 6 in the morning. The state attorney's office called yesterday, Arthur said, sliding a document across the desk. They're offering Maria Santos a plea deal. Matthew leaned forward. What kind of deal? She pleads guilty to state charges, only identity theft and grand theft. They drop all federal charges. Wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering gone. Arthur tapped the paper. In exchange, she gets 7 years in Florida State Prison. Eligible for parole after 5 years if she maintains good behavior. Full restitution required $605,000 to you, $400,000. To George Patterson, $280,000 to other victims. And she has to testify against Dustin Hart. And Dustin, I asked. Separate deal. 10 years federal prison for wire fraud and conspiracy. No parole, federal system doesn't allow it. He cooperates with the FBI about the broader fraud network. Matthew stared at the document. 7 years. That's all. If she takes the deal, yes. If we go to trial, and she's convicted on all counts, state and federal, she's looking at 15 to 35 years. Arthur leaned back. But trials are unpredictable. Juries are unpredictable. This guarantees she serves time. What do you think we should do? Matthew asked. Arthur was quiet for a moment. Professionally, it's not a bad deal. You avoid trial, save yourself 2 to 3 weeks of reliving trauma in front of cameras. You get restitution faster through court-ordered payment plans. And Maria still goes to prison for 7 years. That's significant time. But, Matthew said, but if we go to trial, we have a 95% chance of conviction. The evidence is overwhelming. Text messages, financial records, previous convictions, witness testimony from you and George. She'll get a much longer sentence. And the trial will be public media coverage, a permanent record. It sends a message to other scammers. So we'd win. Almost certainly. But it will cost you emotionally. You'll have to testify. Sit on that stand for 2 to 3 hours while her attorney tries to make you look complicit, stupid, or vindictive. You'll see her every day. Hear her attorney spin lies. Arthur met Matthew's eyes. Only you can decide if that's worth it. Matthew looked at me. I kept my expression neutral. This was his choice. Can I think about it? He asked. You have 48 hours, Arthur said. After that, the offer expires, and we go to trial. That evening, Matthew called George Patterson. I didn't listen to the conversation, gave him privacy in the study, but when he came out 30 minutes later, his face was set. George took a plea deal in his case, Matthew said. Back in 2019. Maria got probation, violated it, and disappeared. He never got to testify. Never got to tell a jury what she did. He paused. He said he regrets it, that he never got closure, that if I have the chance to face her in court, I should take it. The next morning, Matthew had a session with Dr. Reeves. When he came home, he was quieter, thoughtful. What did she say? I asked. That testifying can be empowering, that it gives me control over the narrative. I take back the power Maria stole. He sat down across from me. But she also said it'll be painful, that I'll relive everything. See Maria again. Hear her lawyer attack me. He looked at me. She said only I know if I'm ready. That night, Matthew couldn't sleep. I found him in the living room at 2 in the morning, pacing, staring out the window at the dark ocean. "Can't shut your brain off?" I asked. He shook his head. "I keep thinking, if I take the deal, it's over faster. I can move on. Stop being that guy from the viral wedding video. Get back to normal. But what's normal after this?" He turned to face me. "And if I don't testify, who speaks for the people too scared to come forward?" George lost $400,000 and never got to tell his story in court. There are 5 other victims Arthur found, maybe more we don't know about. If I don't stand up and say what she did publicly, how will other people recognize the warning signs? I walked over, stood beside him. "What do you want to do?" "I want it to be over," he said honestly. "But I need to look her in the eye and show her I'm not stupid, that I'm not the person she thought I was, someone she could destroy and walk away from." His jaw tightened. "She needs to face what she did, every bit of it. And other people need to see this trial. They need to know this can happen to anyone." "Then you've made your decision." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I have." 2 days later, we sat in Assistant State Attorney Jennifer Walsh's office, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a reputation for winning fraud cases. "Mr. Donovan," she said, "have you made a decision about the plea offer?" Matthew straightened in his chair. "Yes, I'm rejecting it. I want to go to trial. I want to testify." Jennifer studied him. "You understand what that means. Maria's attorney will try to discredit you. He'll suggest you were complicit, that you're lying out of embarrassment or revenge. He'll bring up every mistake you made, every moment you trusted her. It will not be pleasant." "I understand. And you're still willing?" "Yes. She needs to face a jury. She needs to hear 12 people tell her she's guilty. And the public needs to see what fraud looks like so they can protect themselves." Jennifer leaned back, a small smile on her face. "Okay then. We go to trial. Opening statements in 2 weeks." She pulled out a legal pad. "Between now and then, we prepare. I need you ready to testify, calm, credible, unshakable. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good." She glanced at Arthur. "Inform the defense that the offer is rejected. We're going to trial." Later, Arthur called us with an update. Maria's public defender says his client is very disappointed. She was hoping to avoid trial to move on with her life. "Too bad," Matthew said. His voice was steady, strong. "Some things can't be skipped." That night, driving home, I looked over at my son. He stared out the window, jaw set, shoulders straight. A month ago, he'd been broken. Now he was preparing to fight. "Matthew," I said quietly. He turned to look at me. "Trial is going to be hard. Harder than you think. You'll sit in that courtroom and hear her attorney tear apart every choice you made. You'll see her every day. It will hurt." "I know. But I'll be there," I said. "Every single day. Front row. You won't face this alone. We do this together." He nodded, and I saw tears in his eyes, not from sadness, but from something else. Determination, purpose, maybe even hope. "Thanks, Dad," he said, "for everything. If you've made it this far, please leave a rating from 1 to 10 for the story's content. Your feedback is very important to me. Quick note, this story contains fictional elements for storytelling purposes. If you don't like that, feel free to pause here. Now let's step into that courtroom. 3 weeks later, I walked into the Broward County Courthouse on Southeast 6th Street. The morning sun illuminated reporters clustered on the marble steps. Matthew had barely slept. Dark circles ringed his eyes as we passed through security. A sketch artist set up near the courtroom doors. Courtroom 6B was paneled in dark oak beneath the Florida state seal. By 8:45, 300 spectators packed the gallery. Judge Patricia Hernandez, a woman in her early 60s with steel-gray hair, called the court to order at 9 sharp. The jury, 6 men, 6 women, took their seats. Maria Santos sat at the defense table in a navy blazer, expressionless. Dustin Hart occupied a separate table. Assistant State Attorney Jennifer Walsh delivered her opening. This is not a love story. It is a crime story. Over 5 years, Maria Elena Santos and Dustin Hart defrauded 5 victims of more than $2 million. They exchanged 1,247 text messages outlining their scheme. You will hear from victims, law enforcement, forensic experts, and financial institutions. You will see proof of identity theft, grand larceny, wire fraud, and money laundering. Defense attorney Marcus Rivera countered. Maria Santos made mistakes, but this is a relationship, not a robbery. Matthew Donovan voluntarily gave her access because he loved her. The next 2 days brought witnesses. Detective Lisa Martinez testified about the investigation surveillance footage and Maria's encrypted phone seized at the wedding. Former FBI agent Frank Morrison explained facial recognition technology linking Isabella Green to Maria Elena Santos and aliases dating to 2012. Representatives from Chase Bank and Wells Fargo confirmed the $480,000 wire transfer to Coastal Properties Fund, a Delaware shell corporation, and $125,000 in unauthorized credit card charges. Bank records showed Maria resold luxury goods through eBay under Lux Resale _ Miami, transferring proceeds via Zelle and Venmo. On day 2, George Patterson took the stand. The 74-year-old retired accountant's hands trembled. He recounted meeting Isabella Martinez in March 2019, 6 months after his wife Nancy's death. Their first date was an art gallery in Coral Gables. In June, he wired his entire $400,000 retirement fund to a fake Key West resort development. For 40 years, I worked. In 1 week, everything was gone. I thought about ending my life every single day for a year. 2 jurors wiped their eyes. On day 3, Matthew testified. Jennifer Walsh led him through February 2022, the art gallery meeting Maria's fabricated orphan story isolation from his best friend Kevin and from me. He detailed the Coastal Properties pitch and the $480,000 wire transfer. He admitted adding Maria as an authorized user on my corporate credit card, but had no idea she spent $125,000 on designer goods for resale. She told me my father was controlling, Matthew said, voice steady but raw. She said he'd never accept anyone replacing my mother. I believed every word. He described sleepless nights, therapy 3 times a week, shattered trust. Marcus Rivera cross-examined. Mr. Donovan, you gave Mrs. Santos your credit card, correct? I gave my fiancé access believing we were building a life together, Matthew replied. I did not give permission to steal $605,000 or to call me stupid in texts with her boyfriend, saying I was just the key to my father's $35 million in real estate. Rivera suggested the messages were jokes. Matthew held firm. When someone plans in writing to disappear to Turks and Caicos after stealing millions, that's conspiracy, not venting. In closing, Walsh displayed the text thread on screen. Matthew's so stupid. Once we get the 15 condos, we're set. His dad is the real target. She pointed to the timeline bank records, 5 victims, 10-year pattern. This was not love. This was a criminal enterprise. After 4 hours, the jury returned. The foreman handed the verdict slip to the bailiff. Judge Hernandez read, guilty on count 1, identity theft. Guilty on count 2, grand theft. Guilty on count 3, organized fraud. Guilty on count 4 wire fraud. Guilty on count 5 conspiracy. Guilty on count 6 money laundering. Maria sat stone-faced. Matthew exhaled, eyes brimming. I wrapped an arm around his shoulders. Behind us, George wiped his face. Kevin gave a thumbs up. Outside, reporters circled. Matthew paused on the courthouse steps. Justice has been done. This was about accountability. If someone isolates you from family pressures, you to cut ties, or asks for financial secrecy, reach out for help. This can happen to anyone. It almost destroyed me, but I'm still here, and I will make sure no one else goes through this alone. 2 weeks later, I returned to the same courtroom. The gallery was smaller this time, perhaps 100 people instead of 300, but the weight in the air felt heavier. Sentencing hearings always did. Matthew sat beside me, hands folded on the table, wearing the same gray suit he'd worn for the verdict. George Patterson sat 2 rows behind us, flanked by his 2 daughters. Maria Santos and Dustin Hart were led in by bailiffs, both in orange jumpsuits and shackles. Judge Hernandez entered and we rose. She surveyed the room with the same steel-gray gaze I remembered from the trial. We are here for sentencing in the matter of the state of Florida versus Maria Elena Santos and Dustin Alexander Hart. The defendants have been convicted by a jury of their peers on multiple counts of fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Before I impose sentence, I will hear victim impact statements. Mr. George Patterson, you may proceed. George walked slowly to the lectern, a single sheet of paper trembling in his hands. He adjusted the microphone and began. Your Honor, my name is George Patterson. I am 74 years old. I worked as an accountant for 40 years. I raised 2 daughters. I paid my taxes. I loved my wife Nancy for 52 years. And when she died of cancer in 2019, I thought my life was over. Then I met a woman who called herself Isabella Martinez. She was kind. She listened. She made me believe I could be happy again. His voice cracked. One of his daughters reached forward and squeezed his shoulder. In June of 2019, I wired $400,000, my entire retirement fund, to what I thought was a real estate development. Within a week, the phone was disconnected. The address was fake. The company didn't exist. I lost everything Nancy and I had saved. I couldn't pay my mortgage. My daughters had to buy my groceries. I thought about suicide every single day for a year. George looked directly at Maria. You didn't just steal my money. You stole my ability to trust anyone. You made me feel like a fool. I'm 74 years old, and I will never recover financially. I will work until I die because of you. Your Honor, I ask that you impose the maximum sentence, not for revenge, but to protect the next widower, the next grieving person, the next victim she will target if she ever gets out. He folded his paper and returned to his seat. The courtroom was silent. Judge Hernandez nodded. Mr. Matthew Donovan, you may proceed. Matthew stood. He didn't bring notes. He walked to the lectern and gripped its edges. Your Honor, my name is Matthew Donovan. I'm 35 years old. I'm a vice president at my father's real estate company. I have a college degree. I'm not stupid, but Maria Santos made me feel stupid every single day for 10 months. He paused, swallowed hard. I met her in February 2022, 8 years after my mother died. She told me she was an orphan. She told me she understood grief. She told me my father would never accept her because he couldn't let go of my mother's memory. She isolated me from my best friend. She convinced me to invest $480,000 in a fake company. She stole $125,000 from my father's credit card, and she did all of it while telling me she loved me. His voice rose, anger seeping through. I haven't slept more than 4 hours a night since the wedding. I see a therapist 3 times a week. I have panic attacks in grocery stores because I'm terrified someone is lying to me. I've pushed away friends because I can't trust my own judgment anymore. Maria didn't just steal money. She stole my ability to believe in people and relationships in myself. He looked at Judge Hernandez. I don't want revenge. I want protection. I want to make sure she can't do this to anyone else. There are people out there right now who are grieving, who are lonely, who are vulnerable. If she gets out too soon, she will find them. She will destroy them. Your Honor, I ask that you impose the maximum sentence allowed by law. Matthew returned to his seat. I squeezed his hand. His palm was slick with sweat. Assistant State Attorney Jennifer Walsh stood. Your Honor, the state recommends a sentence of 7 years in state prison for Ms. Santos with mandatory restitution of $1,285,000, $605,000, to Matthew Donovan $400,000, to George Patterson, and $280,000 to 3 additional victims. For Mr. Hart, the state recommends 10 years in federal prison for wire fraud and conspiracy to run consecutively with any state sentence. Defense Attorney Marcus Rivera rose. Your Honor, my client Maria Santos had a difficult childhood. She made terrible mistakes, but she is capable of rehabilitation. We ask the court to consider a reduced sentence of 5 years with the possibility of early parole. Judge Hernandez's expression didn't change. She opened a folder, reviewed the pre-sentence report, and then looked directly at Maria. Ms. Santos, I have presided over this court for 27 years. I have seen defendants express remorse, show genuine regret, take responsibility for their actions. You have done none of these things. Throughout this trial, you sat stone-faced. You showed no emotion when Mr. Patterson described contemplating suicide. You showed no reaction when Mr. Donovan detailed the psychological damage you inflicted. You have demonstrated a complete lack of empathy, a calculated disregard for human suffering, and a predatory pattern spanning more than a decade. She closed the folder. On count 1 identity theft in the first degree, I sentence you to 5 years in state prison. On count 2, grand theft, I sentence you to 7 years to run consecutively. On count 3, organized fraud, I sentence you to 5 years to run concurrently. Total sentence 7 years in the Florida Department of Corrections with credit for time served. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $1,285,000. You will be eligible for parole after serving 85% of your sentence, which is 5 years and 11 months. Maria's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Judge Hernandez turned to Dustin. Mr. Hart, you were not the mastermind, but you were a willing and active participant. You face federal charges that will be sentenced separately. However, for your role in this state case, I sentence you to 5 years to run consecutively with any federal sentence. The federal court has already indicated a recommendation of 10 years for wire fraud, which means you will serve a total of 15 years. Dustin's head dropped. The bailiffs stepped forward. Maria and Dustin were led out through the side door. Matthew exhaled a long, shuddering breath. Tears ran down his face. I pulled him into a hug, and he collapsed against my shoulder, sobbing. It's over, he whispered. It's finally over. You were so brave, I said. Your mother would be so proud. That evening, back at my office, I sat alone. The lights of Fort Lauderdale, stretched out below the 15 condos Maria had tried to steal, glowed against the Atlantic. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a framed photo of Catherine taken on our 25th wedding anniversary. Her smile was radiant, her eyes full of life. I traced the edge of the frame. I protected him, I whispered. I protected our son. He's going to be okay. I promise you he's going to be okay. Outside, the city hummed. My phone buzzed with notifications, news alerts, messages from friends, emails from reporters. I opened one news headline: Fort Lauderdale fraudster sentenced to 7 years. Accomplice gets 10. Victims call it justice at last. I set the phone down and looked at Catherine's photo one more time. For the first time in months, I felt the knot in my chest begin to loosen. Matthew was safe. The predators were behind bars. And tomorrow we would start rebuilding. 10 months after the wedding, Matthew had rebuilt pieces of his life. He worked full-time at Donovan Properties again, managing 3 of our 15 condominium buildings. He went to the gym 4 mornings a week. His therapy sessions had tapered to once a week, down from 3. He smiled more. He slept better. But he hadn't been on a date. He hadn't even tried. "I'm not ready," he'd told me over dinner one night in October. Every time I think about meeting someone, I remember Maria's face at that art gallery. I can't trust my own judgment. "You will," I'd said, "when the time is right." The time came on a Saturday morning in early November in the produce section of Whole Foods on Federal Highway. Matthew was picking out avocados when a woman reaching for apples knocked over a display pyramid. Honeycrisps tumbled across the floor. She laughed an easy, self-deprecating laugh and dropped to her knees to gather them. Matthew knelt to help. "I swear I'm not always this clumsy," she said, stacking apples back into the bin. "Just most of the time." "Happens to the best of us," Matthew replied. He handed her 3 apples. "You've got good taste. Honeycrisps are the best. They're for my students. I'm a teacher, 3rd grade. We're doing a unit on Johnny Appleseed, and I promised to bring in real apples for taste testing." She smiled. She had brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail, minimal makeup, and warm hazel eyes. She wore jeans sneakers and a faded University of Florida sweatshirt. They talked for 10 minutes in the produce aisle. Her name was Rachel Hayes. She was 31, taught at Coral Springs Elementary, and lived in a small apartment near the school. She'd been single for 2 years. She didn't ask what he did for a living, didn't comment on his watch or his car in the parking lot. When he offered his number, she smiled and said, "I'd like that." 3 days later, they met for coffee at a small cafe in Victoria Park. Matthew had chosen the place deliberately, not one of the upscale waterfront spots Maria had loved, but a neighborhood joint with mismatched chairs, chalkboard menus, and a dog-friendly patio. A test of sorts. Rachel arrived in jeans and a navy cardigan, carrying a canvas tote bag with a stack of ungraded spelling tests visible at the top. She ordered a regular drip coffee, black, and a blueberry muffin. No oat milk latte, no gluten-free pastry, no performance. They talked about her students, 23 8-year-olds, most of whom she adored, 2 of whom drove her crazy in the best way. She talked about her parents in Boca Raton, her father a retired physician, and her mother a nurse who still volunteered at a free clinic twice a week. She talked about books she loved, trips she wanted to take, her dream of eventually teaching overseas for a year. Matthew asked the question he'd been afraid to ask. "Why are you single?" Rachel stirred her coffee. "I was in a relationship for 3 years. It ended badly. He wasn't who I thought he was." "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then met his eyes. "In 2019, my boyfriend, his name was Eric, told me he was starting a landscaping business. He needed a loan to buy equipment. I gave him $20,000. It was everything I'd saved since college. 2 months later, he disappeared. The business didn't exist. I never saw him again." Matthew's chest tightened. "Did you go to the police?" "I did. They said it was a civil matter, not criminal fraud, because I'd given him the money voluntarily. I hired a lawyer, but Eric had moved out of state. I recovered nothing." She shrugged, but her eyes held old pain. "It taught me to be careful, to ask questions, to not ignore red flags just because I want to believe someone." Matthew set his cup down. "Rachel, I need to tell you something." He told her. Not every detail, Not the 15 condos, not the exact dollar amounts, but enough. The wedding. The woman who wasn't who she claimed to be. The theft. The trial. The year of therapy. Rachel listened without interrupting. When he finished, she reached across the table and touched his hand. I understand that fear. The fear that you'll never be able to trust anyone again, that every kind word is a lie, that you're fundamentally broken. But you're not broken, Matthew. You're careful. And that's okay. They talked for 2 hours. When they left, Matthew felt lighter than he had in months. That evening, I sat in my office with Frank Morrison. I'd called him the day after Matthew mentioned Rachel's name. Tell me, I said. Frank opened a folder. Rachel Marie Hayes, born March 14, 1992, in Boca Raton. Parents are Dr. Richard Hayes and Linda Hayes, both clean records, no debts, solid middle-class background. Rachel graduated from the University of Florida in 2014 with a degree in elementary education. She's taught at Coral Springs Elementary for 9 years. Salary, $62,000 a year. No criminal record. No civil judgments, except the one against Eric Daniels, the ex-boyfriend, which she lost because he fled to Georgia. Credit score, 740. Rents a 1-bedroom apartment, drives a 2018 Honda Civic, no flashy spending. She volunteers at a literacy nonprofit on weekends. Social media is boring, mostly photos of her classroom and her parents' dog. Red flags? I asked. None. She's exactly who she says she is. If anything, she's too good to be true, but that's because she actually is good. Frank closed the folder. Alexander, I've been doing this for 30 years. This woman is not Maria Santos. She's not a con artist. She's a teacher who got burned just like Matthew. I exhaled. Thank you, Frank. One more thing, he said. I talked to her principal off the record. He said Rachel is one of the kindest, most dedicated teachers he's ever worked with. Parents love her. Kids adore her. If Matthew's looking for someone genuine, he found her. 2 weeks later, Matthew and Rachel went on their second date, a walk on Fort Lauderdale Beach at sunset. Rachel wore sneakers and a hoodie. She didn't ask about his work, didn't comment on the high-rises we passed, didn't angle for an invitation to one of our properties. She talked about a book she'd just finished, a student who'd finally learned to read after months of struggle, her mom's new puppy. Matthew called me that night. Dad, I think she's different. Different how? She doesn't want anything from me. She just likes me. We talked for 3 hours today, and she never once asked about money or real estate or what kind of car I drive. She told me about her student who wrote a story about a dragon who was afraid of flying, and her eyes lit up like it was the best thing she'd ever read. I smiled. That's a good sign, son. I'm still scared, he admitted. Every time she texts, I wonder if it's part of a plan. Every time she smiles, I wonder if it's real. I hate that Maria did this to me. I know, but Rachel sounds like she understands. And from what Frank found, she's exactly who she says she is. You had Frank check her out. Of course I did. Matthew laughed, a real full laugh I hadn't heard in months. Thanks, Dad. Son, I said, she sounds good, really good. Take it slow, but give her a chance. You deserve to be happy again. I'm trying, he said. I really am. 1 year after the wedding, Matthew and I sat across from each other at a corner table in a quiet Italian restaurant on Las Olas Boulevard. Outside, January rain streaked the windows, blurring the lights into soft halos. Inside, the air smelled of garlic, rosemary, and red wine. But tonight felt different. Lighter. Matthew looked different, too. The dark circles under his eyes had faded. His shoulders no longer carried the same weight. He smiled more easily. The man sitting across from me was no longer the shattered figure I'd held in the courthouse a year ago. "Hard to believe it's been a year," he said, swirling his glass of Chianti. "How are you feeling?" "Grateful. Angry sometimes, but mostly grateful." I nodded. "Tell me about work." His face brightened. "The board promoted me last month. Senior Vice President. I'm managing 8 of our 15 buildings now. Revenue is up 22% from last year. The team respects me again. I feel like I'm actually good at my job, not just riding on your name." "You were always good at your job," I said. "You just forgot for a while." Maria made me forget. She convinced me I was incompetent, that I needed her to make decisions. It's taken a year to unlearn that. "And Rachel?" I asked. His smile softened. "Rachel is different. We've been together for 3 months now. She's patient. She doesn't push. When I have a bad day, she listens. She doesn't try to fix me. She just stays. She came to Thanksgiving and Christmas. I liked her. She liked you too." Matthew set his glass down. "Dad, I need to say something." "Go ahead." He took a breath. "Thank you. For everything. For hiring the investigator. For stopping the wedding. For not saying I told you so when I was drowning in shame. You could have made me feel stupid. But you never did. You just held me. And you made sure I knew it wasn't my fault." My throat tightened. "You're my son. That's what fathers do." "Not all fathers. George's daughters didn't speak to him for 6 months after he lost his savings. He was so ashamed. But you never made me feel like a failure. You made me feel like a victim who deserved protection. That saved me, Dad." I reached across the table and gripped his hand. "Matthew, what Maria did was not a reflection of your intelligence. It was a reflection of her evil. You are not stupid. You are human. Humans are wired to trust, to love. That's not a flaw. That's what makes us capable of connection. Don't let her take that away from you." He wiped his eyes. "I'm trying not to. Rachel is helping." "How's therapy?" "Better. I'm down to bi-weekly sessions now. Dr. Reeves says I've made significant progress." We ate in comfortable silence. Then Matthew spoke again. "I heard from the Department of Corrections last week. Maria is at Lowell Correctional in Ocala. Dustin is in a federal prison in Atlanta. Neither has filed an appeal." "Good," I said. "George got his first restitution payment, $43,000. He called me crying. Said it felt like a small piece of his dignity coming back." "How is George?" "Better. We meet for coffee once a month. He's working part-time as a bookkeeper now. His daughters convinced him to see a therapist. He's not suicidal anymore." I smiled. "You two have become friends." "We have. He's like the uncle I never had." Matthew leaned back, thoughtful. "Dad, I've been thinking. What if we could prevent this from happening to other people? What if we started a program, community education seminars about romance scams, financial fraud? We could partner with nonprofits, senior centers, the police." I set my fork down. "That's a brilliant idea." "You think so? I know so, and I'll fund it. $500,000 to start. We'll call it the Catherine Donovan Initiative in honor of your mother." Matthew's eyes welled up. "Dad, that's perfect." "We'll announce it next month. You and George can be on the board. Rachel, too." "She will be. She's been talking about wanting to volunteer with something meaningful." I raised my glass. "To your mother. And to you. You've turned the worst year of your life into something good." Matthew raised his glass. "To another year. Happier, healthier, and braver." Happier, healthier, and braver. I repeated. We drank. Outside, the rain began to ease. The lights of Las Olas shimmered in the wet pavement, reflecting a city moving forward, a life rebuilding itself one day at a time. 2 months later, on a Friday evening in mid-March, I stood at the back of the Fort Lauderdale Main Library auditorium and watched 87 people file in. A banner hung above the stage, Catherine Donovan Initiative Protecting Communities from Financial Fraud. Her name printed in bold navy letters felt like a blessing. Matthew stood near the podium shuffling note cards. George Patterson sat in the front row wearing a suit. Detective Lisa Martinez checked the microphone. Dr. Sharon Reeves arranged handouts. Rachel stood beside Matthew, one hand resting lightly on his back, grounding him. The program had taken 2 months to build. Matthew served as director while working full-time at Donovan Properties. George became our victim advocate. Detective Martinez volunteered as law enforcement liaison. Dr. Reeves donated time as psychological consultant. Rachel designed every piece of educational material, brochures, infographics, a website. We'd funded the program with $500,000 from Donovan Properties. Tonight was our first workshop. At 6 o'clock, Matthew stepped to the podium. The room quieted. Good evening. My name is Matthew Donovan. A year ago, I almost married a woman who wasn't real. He told them everything. The art gallery in February 2022. The fabricated orphan story. The isolation. The $480,000 investment in a fake company. The $125,000 credit card theft. The wedding that never happened. I'm 36 years old. I have a master's degree. I run a successful company, and I was completely fooled. Because Maria Santos was a professional. She studied me. She identified my vulnerabilities, grief over my mother's death, loneliness, desire to prove my independence, and she exploited every single one. He paused, scanning the crowd. Seniors with walkers, middle-aged singles taking notes, adult children protecting elderly parents. I'm not here to tell you I was stupid. I'm here to tell you I was human. If it happened to me, it can happen to anyone. Tonight we're going to teach you the red flags. He clicked to the first slide, red flag number 1, love bombing. This is when someone showers you with affection immediately. Constant texts, expensive gifts, declarations of love within days. It's designed to overwhelm your judgment. A woman raised her hand. How do you tell the difference between love bombing and someone who's just really into you? Great question. Healthy interest builds gradually. Love bombing is instant and intense. If someone talks about marriage or sharing finances within the first month, that's a red flag. He moved through the other red flags: isolation, gaslighting, financial exploitation. After 30 minutes, Matthew invited George to the stage. George gripped the podium. My name is George Patterson. I'm 74 years old. In 2019, I lost $400,000 to a woman who called herself Isabella Martinez. My entire retirement fund, everything my late wife Nancy and I had saved for 50 years. His voice wavered. I thought about killing myself every single day for a year. Because I felt so stupid, so ashamed. But I'm here to tell you it was not my fault. And if it happens to you, it is not your fault. These people are professionals. Several people wiped their eyes. Detective Martinez explained how to document evidence and file police reports. Dr. Reeves discussed intermittent reinforcement and trauma bonding. The Q&A session ran over by 20 minutes. As the crowd filtered out, a woman in her 60s approached Matthew, tears streaming. Thank you. I've been talking to someone online for 3 months. He just asked me for $10,000. I was going to send it tomorrow. But after hearing your story, I'm not. You just saved me. Matthew's eyes welled up. I'm so glad you came. Over the next 6 months, the Catherine Donovan Initiative expanded across Florida. We held workshops in 12 cities. More than 1,200 people attended. 27 individuals reported they'd avoided scams that would have cost them a combined $4,200,000. Rachel attended 8 of the 12 workshops, cheering Matthew on. Between events, she refined materials, updated the website. She never asked for recognition. She just worked quietly and tirelessly. In late August, we held our 12th workshop in Key West. 130 people packed a community center designed for 80. Matthew delivered his story with confidence, no longer reading from notes. When he finished, the room erupted, a standing ovation. People stood and clapped for 3 full minutes. I sat in the back row and wiped my eyes. Catherine would have been so proud. Our son, the man who'd nearly lost everything, was saving lives. After the event, Matthew found me outside. "My dad, did you see that? 130 people." "I saw. Your mother would be so proud of you." Rachel appeared beside him, slipping her hand into his. "You were amazing." He smiled, a real, full, unguarded smile. "We were amazing. All of us." 2 years after the wedding, on an ordinary Saturday morning in January, Matthew stood in his apartment kitchen, holding an envelope. The return address read, Maria Elena Santos, inmate number 48,291, Lowell Correctional Institution, Ocala, Florida 34470. His hands shook. He called me. "Dad," he said, voice tight. "I got a letter from Maria." I set my pen down. "Did you open it?" "Not yet. I don't know if I should." "I'm here," I said. "Whatever you need." "Okay. I'm going to read it now. I'll call you back." 20 minutes later, my phone rang. "I read it," Matthew said. And Chokti, 3 pages, handwritten. She admits everything. Says she never loved me. Says she targeted me because I was vulnerable after Mom died. She talks about her childhood abusive father. Her mother died when she was 10, foster care at 12. She says she learned to lie to survive. But she's not making excuses. She says, this is context, not justification. I stayed silent, letting him process. She acknowledges the trial, says I testified with dignity, that I gave other victims a voice. She doesn't expect me to forgive her. She doesn't ask for a response. She just needed me to know the truth. She ends with, I hope you find happiness. Real happiness. The kind I was never capable of giving. How do you feel? I asked. Empty, he said. Not angry, just empty. Like she's a stranger. Like the person I thought I loved never existed. That's because she is, I said. The Maria you loved was a character. This letter might be honest, but it doesn't change what she did. I know, but part of me feels relieved. For 2 years, I've wondered if she ever felt remorse. Now I know she does. And somehow that makes it easier to let go. You don't owe her anything, I said. Not a response, not closure, not even your attention. Don't let her back in, even on paper. I won't. I'm going to put it in the safe at the office, like a historical document, something that happened, but doesn't have power over me anymore. That's wise, I said. Dad, Dr. Reeves told me once that healing doesn't require forgiveness, that I can acknowledge Maria's humanity without forgiving what she did. I think I finally understand. Maria came from pain. She became a predator. Both things are true, but I don't have to carry her pain for her. No, I said. You don't. That evening, Matthew drove to my office. We unlocked the safe in the back room, the same safe that held the trial transcripts, the wire transfer receipts, the 1,247 text messages. He placed Maria's letter inside, sealed it in a manila folder labeled Maria Santos Prison Correspondence, January 2025, and locked the safe. "It's over," he said. "It is," I replied. Matthew turned to me. "Dad, I think I'm ready to propose to Rachel." I blinked. "You are?" "I am. She's been with me for over a year. She knows everything. She's never asked for anything. She just loves me. For me." I smiled. Catherine would have loved her. "I'm going to propose next month, on Valentine's Day. I already bought the ring." "I think she'll say yes," I said. That night, Matthew called one more time. "Dad, I slept last night. All the way through. No nightmares. I just slept." "That's good, son." And this morning I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about her in days. Not until the letter came. And even then I read it and felt nothing. Indifference. "That's healing," I said. I'm ready to close the chapter on Maria Santos. For real this time. She's in prison. She'll be there for 5 more years. And when she gets out, I'll be married to Rachel. I'll have a life she can't touch. The Catherine Donovan Initiative will have helped hundreds of people. And she'll be a footnote, a cautionary tale. Nothing more. I felt my throat tighten. I'm proud of you, Matthew. Thanks, Dad, for everything. For saving me. For never giving up on me. "That's what fathers do," I said. "Not all fathers," he replied. "But you did, and I'll never forget that." The next morning, Matthew called again. His voice was clear, steady, certain. "Dad," he said, "I'm ready to close the chapter on Maria Santos." 3 years after the wedding that never happened. Matthew knelt in the sand at Fort Lauderdale Beach and asked Rachel Hayes to marry him. It was early January 2026. The sun hung low over the Atlantic, painting the sky amber and rose. Rachel wore jeans and a sweater. Matthew held a simple platinum band with a single diamond. "Trichielny," he said, "you've seen me at my worst. You've never asked me to be anyone but myself. I love you. Will you marry me?" She cried. She nodded. "Yes." They called me from the beach. "Huh, Dad," she said, "yes." "Congratulations, son. I'm so happy for you both. We want a small wedding, 40 people, your backyard." "Perfect," I said. A week later, we held an engagement party in my backyard. 40 guests gathered under string lights. George Patterson sat with his daughters, smiling. Detective Martinez chatted with Dr. Reeves. Arthur Campbell raised his scotch glass. Kevin Riley laughed with Rachel. When the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood and tapped my glass. 3 years ago, my son was supposed to get married. I canceled that wedding. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But it was also one of the most important. I looked at Matthew. "Son, you've rebuilt yourself. You went to therapy. You confronted your pain. You turned your trauma into a mission that has helped thousands. You became the man your mother always knew you could be. Catherine would be so proud." I turned to Rachel. "Thank you for loving my son, for being patient when he was afraid. Welcome to our family." Rachel wiped her eyes. "Thank you, Alexander, for saving Matthew's life, for raising a man worth loving." The crowd applauded. Matthew hugged me tight. George stood. "Matthew, 3 years ago we were both broken, but you turned that pain into purpose. The Catherine Donovan Initiative saved my life. You let me help others, and in doing so, you helped me heal. He raised his glass. To Matthew and Rachel. To Matthew and Rachel. The crowd echoed. Later, Matthew and I walked to the end of my dock. Dad, I never thanked you properly for not giving up on me. You could have been angry. You could have said, I told you so. But you just loved me. I put my hand on his shoulder. That's what fathers do. The initiative is in 4 states now, 20 cities. 3,500 people attended. 83 avoided scams totaling $12 million. That's because you believed in me. No, I said. That's because you had courage. I just gave you tools. You did the work. 2 weeks later, on a sunny Saturday afternoon, I stood beside Rachel at the back of my yard. She wore a simple white dress. A string quartet played. 40 people sat in white chairs. Matthew stood beneath a flower archway, tears streaming down his face. Ready? I whispered to Rachel. Ready. We walked down the aisle. Slowly. Every step felt significant. When we reached Matthew, Judge Hernandez smiled. Who gives this woman? She asked. I do, I said. With all my heart. I placed Rachel's hand in Matthew's. He looked at me, mouthed, thank you, and smiled. That smile was worth everything.